ヤギ様から盗み取った北斗神拳、北斗を味合わせてやるわ。
Hey everybody, welcome to the video. My name is Bitwin. Today we're going to be finally looking at what the PTR testing for the upcoming raid, the Bolt of the Incarnates in Dragonflight, is going to be looking like for us Holy Paladins. We will go over what builds these players are playing, what healing they're doing, how they compare to other healers, their damage, their mana consumption, etc, etc, in hopes of understanding a little bit more of what might be in store for us in Dragonflight. So you'll see some footage in the background which will not have a direct relation with what I'm talking, but we might lay over some information on top of that footage. But before we get into the video, please drop a like on it and also subscribe to the channel so we can keep on growing into Dragonflight. So let's go! So after looking at some of the logs that I found through the Paladin Discord as well as some footage from the PTR testing, we have found some pretty interesting things. Namely, that there is a huge difference between playing a regular melee Holy Paladin build versus a much more caster-focused build. And both of those builds are still going to be on melee, but I would say those are the two kind of builds you can find right now. There is no such a thing as a full ranged Holy Paladin, although with this sort of build you could potentially do so. But firstly, as I mentioned, there's a big difference in the mana consumption of these builds, and as you can expect it, this comes because of Crusader Striking. Yes, Crusader Strike is still taking up so much of our mana, and it does not bode well for this sort of build. Now, both builds can put out a lot of healing, however, the mana consumption difference is way too big, and I would believe that specifically in Mythic and when fights are going on for a long time, we could be looking at a place where playing a much more caster-focused build could be potentially the play. Now, when I say caster-focused build, you might imagine that we are casting a lot of Holy Light and Flash of Light, and that's our main source of healing. Now, that's not the case, however, you will have to cast some Holy Lights and maybe some Flash of Lights as well, but for the most part a caster focused build would be doing a lot of Holy Lights, and those would be going on the beacon targets. So the reason for this is not because of the healing, which also gives us some healing, but also because it's going to generate a lot of holy power when we're replaying with Inflorescence of the Sunwell together with casting some Lights of Dawn, or sorry, some Holy Lights on top of the beacon targets. We're going to be getting a lot of holy power for a very cheap mana cost. This is also going to play really well together with this talent that reduces the cooldown of Holy Shock whenever we consume an Infusion of Light. So we'll be able to generate a lot of holy power through this gameplay loop of sometimes casting some Holy Lights onto the beacon targets, and we'll just have so much holy power that we end up having an insane amount of Light of Dawn that we can just throw out. So our main source of healing with this sort of build is going to be Light of Dawn and Beacon, of course, our trusty old beacons. However, we also get a hell of a lot of Holy Shocks going out, because we also play with this talent I mentioned, so we get a little bit of cooldown reduction onto our Holy Shock. We don't get as much cooldown reduction as if we were playing with Crusader Smite. However, if you are playing Crusader Smite, you are probably looking into more mana issues, and I do not believe that that's going to be sustainable. But both builds seem to have done some decent numbers looking at some of the fights that I've been looking at. The big difference was both the mana, where the caster focus build was just much more mana sustainable. You could go on for a long time. There is this talent which I forgot the name about, I'm sorry, but whenever you cast a Holy Light you will get 1% of your mana back, so that alone just makes your mana consumption, your mana sustain much stronger. Melee focus build would be doing a lot more damage. That is also a very determining factor. It would be doing a lot more melee damage, but you would be getting out of mana quite quickly. Now, I haven't really seen many Marat's focus builds, and I don't really know why that is the case. Now, we've had Untempered Dedication being buffed, and I do believe that Light of the Martyr should still be doing a lot of healing. However, it just seems like the way that you generate this holy power when you're playing this caster build, it's just making it so that you cannot even really, you shouldn't really be trying to find the spot to throw in a Light of the Martyr. Moreover, a lot of the Martyr can become quite mana intensive when you're playing this way, but you just have so much holy power. You're constantly using Holy Shock, constantly using Light of Dawn. You're just running in holy power. Also, you're trying to bounce back and forth between 5 and 0 holy power, so you can play around this talent, which I also forgot the name about, I'm sorry. But that is probably the reason. I would still expect Light of the Martyr to do respectable healing, but you are going from a much more spot healing focused healer when you're playing Light of the Martyr, or Marats rather, to a much more just straight up raid healer and kind of a tank healer after all when you're using those holy lights onto the beacon targets. So that's what you're moving away from, just being a spot healer which covers up for the gaps in the raid, to a much more, I just do a lot of raid healing, but also I heal melee for the most part, which could also be pretty bad. But we can also just look into talenting into the 40-yard Light of Dawn and position ourselves properly, so we can also hit the range. But for the most part, you know, you could always be seeing yourself focusing on healing the melees. And if that's the case, could potentially be bad whenever you have a lot of, I don't know, ground effects, or the healing for the melee is much easier and reliable than the healing from the range, so the healers are just pumping the melee and you are a bit redundant. Regardless, I do quite like this sort of idea where you just weave in holy lights, your mana seems to not be an issue whatsoever, and you are just pumping out some Lights of Dawn and some Holy Shocks. Now, looking at the numbers, you could see that you are just not casting that many Holy Lights. Holy Lights are a little bit of a filler spell. You don't even consume all your infusions all that much. That's not your focus. The healing from your Holy Lights is not that big anyways, and you are not looking at spot healing with it because it is absolutely clunky to do so. The idea is just to cover up some healing onto the tanks, as well as just abuse the Holy Power generation from Inflorescence and using a Holy Light onto a beacon target. That's just the whole idea of it. So this is going to be quite interesting. If this ends up being the play, we could potentially be looking at a quite, I don't want to say, you know, boring, but once again, you're not caring too much about your mana if this is looking like the case. If you are looking to play a lot more of a usual build as you would expect it in Shadowlands, the melee build still pretty much works the same way, but the mana consumption will definitely seem to be looking like an issue. A lot of things are coming into play with this, just the fact that we have spells like Divine Toll that are soaking up mana, and we are just pumping a lot of Crusader Strike as always, just dumping mana and mana and mana. Yeah, I guess this is probably not what a lot of people want to hear, that the melee playstyle is kind of going away, but I think for the most part this won't be too different. I think it will take a little while to take away the you know, go-to of pressing Crusader Strike when you want to generate Holy Power, but instead you will just look for Holy Light onto a beacon target, which is also going to be pretty mechanically simple if that's always going to be your go-to. So you could end up with a quite similar build that does quite a competitive amount of healing. It's still filling the role of being quite a spot healer. In this case would be spot healing with Holy Shock, and that's pretty much about it. We could also just still bring, you know, Devotion Aura, so that's that, and every other benefit that a Paladin comes with. So the big downside would be the damage going away, which for the sake of progress rating, we could be looking at, you know, maybe having to tone down our healing in favor of some other options for more damage. But I don't really see too much of how this could be done, to be fair. You end up casting, and when you're casting, you're not using melees. So how would you increase your damage here? Giving up healing, I do not really see too much. In anyways, like, they've been nerfing the damage that a Holy Paladin can do regardless. They just tune down our judgment damage, they tune down quite some other stuff, but most of that other stuff probably didn't really apply to rating anyways. So for the most part, it's just the fact that you're losing a lot of melee hits when you're casting so much, and you're also not using Crusader Strike, so that's also a little bit of damage that you lose. But yeah, interesting kind of information here. I believe that Holy Paladin, looking at this footage and some of the numbers that I could find on the logs, is not at a very bad spot, but, you know, there's a huge disparity between some of these logs. You can see Paladins being absolute bottom feeders, you can also find Holy Paladins absolutely pumping. You can never really tell because every raid is a huge difference depending on the people that are playing there, depending on their understanding of the fight, what kind of build they're playing, how good they are. There's many factors. Also, people that are from NA are gonna always have a big advantage because the lag during this PTR testing is usually unbearable. You can barely play if you're far away from NA. So yeah, can't really get any conclusive information, but we could see a trend of this sort of build that I will be putting down in the description, by the way. If you want to find out what build I'm talking about, go ahead and check out what they were playing. I don't really know this, I don't really think this would potentially be what you would end up playing in Mythic Plus. You are looking at a much more different approach to healing and doing damage when you're playing Mythic Plus, so disregard this information if you only care about Mythic Plus. This is much more about the state of Holy Paladin when you are thinking about raiding, which I know a lot of you that come to my channel don't really care too much about or might just be focused on Mythic Plus. But anyways, as a Holy Paladin channel and somebody that plays Holy Paladin in all forms of content, except PvP, yeah, I think this is quite interesting information. At least I did not really check out anything before recently, so yeah, I think this is giving me quite some hopes. At the same time, I'll have to play around with it and see how it feels, but I don't think it will feel that bad. The worst thing that could happen is that we ended up spreading out a lot of Holy Lights all over the place, and then that would cock our overall healing because our Holy Power generation is down. I think the option of spamming the Holy Lights onto the beacon targets for a lot of Holy Power generation is actually outweighing the Holy Power generation of just Crusader striking like a madman like we've been doing for about 4 years now. So actually 2 years. It was only Shadowlands when they introduced Holy Power. But anyways, yeah, I think I don't really have any more information here. If you want to check out some of these logs that I was using to base these assumptions and all that I talked about, go ahead and check out the description below. Also, if you're interested in any of this discussion or you want to find out some more logs and more information, absolutely go ahead and join the Paladin Discord and check out the Holy Dragonflight channel, talk about stuff in there. Hopefully they don't bash me too much for this video. And yeah, anyways, I'll be seeing you on the next one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Bye bye, see ya, please like and subscribe, bye bye.